This is Iron Lateran. He is a realistic, medieval, lore-locked, hardcore Ironman. This means that he can't use magic, can't runecraft, can't use any magical items, or teleports. My goal is to explore the world of Runescape as a scholar of literature and medieval lore and see how it stacks up to the real thing. I'll be doing this experiment as long as is needed, but in the meantime, I have monsters to slay, heretics to persecute, lessons to learn,
Pizza is not consistent with a medieval RPG.
and quests to complete. Enjoy. You know, it says in the New Testament that God cares about even like the smallest sparrow. But I'm gonna have to say God cares more about chickens based on how much prayer experience I'm getting. Basically, if I love God enough, it makes my skin turn into rocks. I don't know how much historical precedent there is for that, but it's pretty rad. You know, actually, RuneScape does do one thing kind of interesting as far as religion goes. You obviously have the two largest competing sects, Saradomin and Baroque, and yes, there are other gods, but they don't have a ton of physical manifestation in the world. During the Middle Ages, you had the Great Schism, which is the separation between the Western and Eastern sects of the Catholic Church, and the Eastern sect ended up becoming the Eastern Orthodox Church. So I'm not saying one is Zamorak and one is Saradomin, okay, but you did have two major competing religions with monotheistic themes that most people would ascribe to one or the other if they were living in Europe at that time. Well, I have accidentally attempted to murder this man, so I guess I'm killing a farmer. Whoops. Believe it or not, the wanton destruction that your average adventurer can cause isn't too far off from the situation that was happening during and after the 100 Years' War, where knights found it really profitable to stop working for their lords and start working for hire. So this whole questing situation you have is kind of in that vein, where, oh, so-and-so wants this guy dead. Okay. Oh, so-and-so wants me to go get this thing for him. Okay. Give me some money and I'll do it. I'm gonna go to the church. Restore my prayer. Oh, nope, we're going into church. Hold up. Always take your helmet off. Don't go into church bearing weapons. That's rude. And obviously don't run in church. This is very reminiscent of what you would see in a medieval style church. They even have, if you notice down here, this is what you would kneel on to pray. So you'd be sitting here, they'd say pray, you'd get down and you kneel, and they'd have a soft cushioned section in front of the pews or up in front of the altar to pray. Golden candlesticks, very nice. They did a really fun job here. There's a church organ. I can't play it. So this is pretty neat. I would not have explored this if I wasn't role-playing this. Oh, now listen to those dulcet tones. Yeah, those organ sounds are actually quite lovely. I encourage anybody who hasn't already done it, go to the church in Lumbridge and play the organ. The music is actually pretty nice and really reminiscent of like the liturgical sounds that you would hear at a church in that time. Many times the fletching of arrows was done either by a person whose job was to fletch arrows, or all the parts were made separately and the archer himself attached the pieces. So there is historical precedent to making the archer himself do this. What does not make sense is, one, we're using chicken feathers. Historically, they would be goose feathers, at least for the longbowmen. And you would never use bronze on an arrow tip. Bronze is an extremely soft metal. The only time I can really think of bronze being used intentionally for a projectile weapon would have been a javelin, which was thrown, and the purpose of having a bronze head was that the bronze, because it's soft, when it enters a shield or piece of armor, it deforms on impact and becomes flattened, and you actually can't pull it out. Iron is plentiful and readily accessible for anybody who's willing to make weaponry. In addition to being goose feathers, almost all arrows, at least for the particular archer, would have been pulled from the same wing, almost always the right wing of the animal, because the flight feathers, which are the ones that would be used, have a different curvature on the left and right side. So if you make them from the left and right wing, half your arrows are going to spin one way and half your arrows are going to spin the other way. You know, and while we're talking about arrowheads, actually, let's just keep on this for a second. The idea of an English longbow piercing plate armor is almost complete myth. Like, would it be physically possible for a fully drawn English longbow to punch through plate armor at X distance? Yeah, sure. But as far as I know, there's not a lot of recorded instances of it happening, at least not to a lethal level, right? They were meant to take out lightly armored or unarmored foot soldiers from great range, especially during a siege when you would need lots of people. In the instances where barbed or, you know, kind of broadhead arrows were used in combat to penetrate flesh, which did happen, by the way, people always have this idea of like, oh yeah, you gotta rip it out or you have to push it through the person. There's all these weird theories about how a puncture wound was handled, but we do have documentation of a solution that they had, which is that they would just take a feather, they'd shove it into the wound, and the tip of the feather, the quill part, would cover the barb on the arrow. So when they pulled the arrow out, the barb wouldn't catch on anything because it was covered by the quill. Look at this sheep. Oh, he's so entertained. In case you don't remember, or I didn't mention it, our goal here is to get to iron bolts for our eventual crossbow, which will be the Dorgishin crossbow that has bolts up to iron. So that'll be the maximum that we can use for the Dorgishin crossbow. It's not too hard to get a hold of for us with this limited account. It obviously has the bone bolt option. Now, I bet I can imagine what not a single one of you is thinking, but I'll answer the unasked question anyway. Is there such a thing as a bone crossbow in the Middle Ages? Bone is a very useful, very versatile material. It has incredible strength for very low density, meaning it's very light for how strong it is. And depending on the type of bone, it can be very flexible, okay? Many crossbows were made with animal horn, which is a type of bone. Well, specifically, it's keratin, it's a hair, but, you know, close enough. And bone was used to fashion either the bodies or aiming mechanisms or other parts of a crossbow that could be light and strong. I think it's time to finally start slaying cattle for their leather. I've just become bored with fletching by now. I'll go back to it, but right now I do need to get some leather going so I can get my stash up for crafting. Some pedants in the crowd will notice that I am not using a scimitar. I'm using a longsword. Why am I using a longsword even though it is less efficient than the scimitar? I can tell you why. Because the scimitar is a 9th to 12th century Persian or Turkish weapon that wouldn't be adopted by Europeans for another few hundred years. Obviously, what with the Crusades and all, Europeans were not inclined to adopt the weapons of their adversaries. Also worth noting, the scimitars in RuneScape are 110% inaccurate. There has never been a scimitar used in battle, as far as I know, that looks quite like the scimitar in RuneScape. If you did want a historical representation of the RuneScape scimitar, you would actually need to look up the Chinese Dao blade, which was obviously never used in medieval Europe. And in fact, as far as I can tell, there is no weapon in medieval Europe that even remotely resembles the scimitar, much less a scimitar that resembles the scimitar. You have to go to the other side of the Eurasian continent to find an example of the RuneScape scimitar. The greatest strength that the scimitar had over a traditional sword was that it was more effective from mounted combat because you could swing down at an opponent and you did not risk your weapon becoming lodged in their armor or body and being torn from your hand. I know this is a really minor point, but these types of cows are exactly the type of cow that you would expect to see in medieval Europe. So 100% accuracy to RuneScape creators for nailing the type of cow. Aw, look at this hussy. She should know better, strumpetous harlot.
We got good game, Iron Lateran.
Oh no, I think it's Grendel. Away, foul beast. Oh, excellent. Alright, and it wouldn't be an Ironman video unless we completed one of the skill goals that we set up last time. So, here we go, folks. Here begins the grind. Let's go. Oh, well, that was easy. I wasn't going to put out a third video so quickly, but I had to give a quick thank you to everyone who subscribed and gave me advice on my first 2 videos regarding simple things like sound and video editing. Your response has been amazing, and I'm excited to do more. As far as our goals are concerned, I've hit 40 mining and I have plenty of arrows to begin the ranged grind. By the time I see you next, I should have hit all the aforementioned goals, or at least most of them, and we'll be ready to start our prerequisite quests to get our best in slot ranged gear for a long time. I can also explore money-making methods since I can't use high alchemy because it's of the devil, and will need to buy both the frog leather gear and the initiate armor. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe for more. Thank you.